Thank you very much for joining me today on another episode of Talking Cloud. Now, this is where we talk about cloud, all things cloud, anything cloud. If it has to do with cloud computing, it's a topic we'll cover today. And man, I am so excited because, I am no expert, but I do know where to find them. And man, have I got an exciting one today. I'm talking to somebody. Mike has been in the business a long time. He's a field CTO with a cloud company, Cohesity. I'm really super excited to talk with Mike Litschin today. Mike, thank you very much for joining us today. So happy to have you on the program.
Well, it's great to be with you, Grant, and I'm really excited to have this kind of chat, to sit down for a few and talk about how everything seems to involve cloud nowadays, whether you're a business, whether it's your personal one, whether you're, especially now with us all from home, it seems like cloud it's no longer just a buzzword, but now it is a way of life.
Truly, everything is cloud today, isn't it?
It's amazing. I think even when you start having the people that, as you said, long-term IT people like you and I have always had the experience of, you become the IT person for family. Or you try to avoid becoming the IT person for family, I should say.
Yeah, there's no way getting out of that, though, man.
Oh, no, you always do. But when they start bringing up the cloud, you know it's no longer a buzzword anymore.
Yeah, that's for sure. When I see it on the Mike, on the Starbucks menu, cloud macchiato, that's when I really know it's seeped into our everyday vernacular. Hey, do me a favor, and for the listeners, why don't you give us some perspective, some Z-axes on Mike, and maybe some history on your career, what you're doing now, and then maybe elaborate a little bit about Cohesity.
Sure. So as Grant said, I'm Mike Litschin. I have been around the industry longer than I probably should calculate for, but I actually started in college days doing web development. For a little while, was actually helped write the website for University of Maryland's financial aid site at one point. That was one of the biggest things I had done.
Wow.
Was doing web development, and then ended up at a company that their Exchange 5.5 admin left. And they looked at me and said, well, you're the other computer guy. You can do that, as if I had ever managed a server in my life. And I quickly became the IT admin there. It was a small printing firm. Worked all the way through college, everything from law firms to printing companies to actually a group that helped filter drug prevention money to state and local agencies. Moved on after college. Did actually not get a degree in computer science or anything. My bachelor's degree is actually in criminology and criminal justice. Has nothing to do with IT. But it was a really fun degree. We got to do things like figure out on the dollhouse what was the crime that was committed, if there was one. That was kind of a cool lab.
Yeah.
But then ended up doing a lot of things as an admin engineer for resellers, moved up through being an IT director at some different internal places. After a while, went back into the reseller space as an architect, helped build out a virtualization practice for a really large VMware and EMC reseller. At the time, very small. I think I was employee 7 or 8, but we really grew that one quickly. And then moved over to the vendor side just shy of 10 years ago or so. Spent 6 or 7 years at Nexenta doing software-defined storage with NAS stuff, whether it was targets and backups, was sales engineering director there, some product management before I became their field CTO. Left there now just about 2 years ago to come over to Cohesity. And the reason I jumped to Cohesity was really it needed to be something that was kind of that next player, somebody that was changing a market. And they, at the time, were very targeted on data protection and the backup space. And when you think about it, the backup space was not the cloud. It's been that very traditional for the enterprise and data center. You got your real traditional players and hadn't changed in years.
Yep.
So seeing a company that was really making a difference was redefining the way that it needed to be done, utilizing some of the things that I had learned from my storage background, utilizing some of the things from virtualization. Cohesity has been around now since 2009 and was really initially built on this scale out file system that has a lot of similarities to the Google file system, mainly because our original founder was one of the developers there before he actually started Mohit, started Nutanix before he left and came over and started Cohesity. Now with Cohesity, I came in initially to be one of our principal technologists. And while it's a fancy title, really what it means is I work with a team, and now my team that we go out and we are the representatives for the company at trade shows with analysts, bringing the technical bend to the marketing side of things, as well as being field CTOs, going out and working with large customers, making sure that the total data center is being considered. I think that is a lot of time you deal with a vendor, and it's a very slim focus. They're only worried about what they're selling. And our job as field CTOs is to talk about the whole data center. And it works great because Cohesity is a platform at this point. It's not just data protection. There's a NAS side of things. There are multiple different cloud side of things. So we can get into that. Everything from being a target into the cloud, back up your data directly to the cloud, archive out to the cloud to keep some costs down. Or even we just recently launched a backup as a service actually running in the cloud that you don't even need to have hardware on-prem anymore for it. So really
the trends, right? That's the trends.
It's so much easier for a lot of people to kind of the inroad into there. Obviously that there's still, you get large enterprises that have their data centers, but people are realizing that their staff, their specialty is whatever the company is built for. Their specialty is not IT.
Right.
So
right.
Let the cloud do that.
Yeah, exactly. So back it up for me a little bit and just at a high level, Mike, explain who is and what is Cohesity, at a high level.
So we are a data management platform, a data management solution. So Cohesity we're based out of San Jose, California, and our premise is to reimagine data management and reimagine how people are looking at all their data. Stop making data protection and insurance policy. Utilize that data. So to give an example on that, it's things like if I've got file data that's sitting there, now I'm backing it up. Well, what am I doing with that? Well, why not utilize it for test dev workloads or databases is a great example. I've got a database in production that's running. Well, I'm backing that up, but how do I get a copy of that to my developers to improve my front end? Well, if I can utilize my backup and do quick clones of that can come up and go down and go away and become a cloud version of it, and a version that is an internal cloud, as well as even put some out and work with some of the AWS tools. That's what we're looking to do. We're looking at how do we scan, being able to check your data and protect for things like let you know if there's anomalies that shouldn't be in your backups. Maybe you've been hit by ransomware and didn't know it. Obviously, security is top of mind for so many people. And ransomware isn't an if, it's when, right, for just about everybody. Being able to say, we're not the first line of defense there. I mean, you should have your firewalls, your IPS, your IDS, all that. And biggest, your user training. Oh my God, do your user training so that they know, don't click on those emails. I mean, I think we've all been saying it for a long time, but people still click on that image, click on that email that they shouldn't to introduce something in the environment. Well, that happens. In all reality, at some point, people get hit. So what we look at doing is letting you know as soon as we see something changes so that you can recover from the quickest point in time as possible.
So are you looking at data patterns and anomalies? And I mean, how are you seeing that?
So a lot of it is, one of the easiest, there's multiple different algorithms that and patterns that they use, but probably the easiest example that I normally give is most ransomware systems, the first thing they do is encrypt a drive. Well, when you encrypt a drive, it often will double the size of that drive. Mm-hmm. So if I'm backing up a system and for the last 2 months, it's been a 200 gig drive, and then all of a sudden it jumps and it's a 370 gig drive, we'll alert on that. It could be somebody put something in there. That could happen. They could have expanded the drive. But normally that big of a jump isn't common. So it's something that is an anomaly. It's just one of the many different anomalies that the company has built into our machine learning that creates that algorithm to know. And the great thing is it learns. So if you do have that where it's for 2 weeks, it's 200, and then it jumps up to 300, and 2 weeks later it jumps to 400, and that's just the pattern of it. We do look at those patterns.
So let's say we go from the 200 to 375, do you have triggers that will automatically, SNMP or something that's going to send hey, Mike, this you might want to take a look at? How's the administrator manager notified?
So there's multiple different ways. There is alerting into your alerting tools. We have alerting built in for email alerting. Probably one of the coolest things that I think we just released in the fall of last year is a mobile app that it provides you a read-only access into your Helios environment, which is our platform. It's what we use for our multi-array management, but also the whole platform is Helios. That's what the product is. But that Helios mobile, what it allows you to do is see what's going on, sees your backups, and when you have that anomaly that's detected, it'll actually do a push notification on your phone. In all reality, ransomware doesn't hit from 9 to 5 when the admin is working Monday through Friday.
Yeah, that's right.
If your key admin has the app on their phone, they may hardly look at. In all reality, when you have backups going or your NAS is going, how often do you really look at the UI? Most people don't look at it too often. Maybe you check it daily when you come in on Monday through Friday in the morning and make sure that everything happened overnight that was supposed to happen.
Yeah, you're kind of looking for anything that should cause you concern, right? You're just saying, hey, did it work okay? Yep, I don't see anything. And you're on to the next job, right?
Right. And then you go to the next thing because you don't realistically, your backups should not be taking that much time. If they are, then look at a new modern backup solution. You're spending too much time on backups. It being able to have something that will pop up and tell you that off cycle on it, I think is really cool on it, not just through alerting mechanisms, but pushing to your phone. And that way you can literally look at it. Once you've looked at it, you've seen it, then you can go onto the UI, onto our SaaS-based UI, onto Helios and see, okay, what do I need to do with it? Do I need to restore back to a previous? Is it fine? Is it an anomaly I don't need to worry about? What do I want to do with it? I can make that call as it matters for my company.
Yeah, interesting. So, I'm just sitting here and as I'm listening to you, Mike, I'm just thinking how much this must be under a transformation in the backup space. I remember what was it? I think the ad I heard for Carbonite or one of these, which was one of the early promoting this dynamic cloud backup. But you guys are big boys playing in the enterprise space, not going after ma and pa. What are the big changes you're seeing aside from it's no longer on-prem, it's going to the cloud? What changes are you seeing in the world of backup?
I think what we do on that, I think to look at that is we've been able, because being more of a data management platform on it, we've been able to create things like our CyberScan utility that allows for when you've got VMs that you're backing up, you're backing them up, you're consistently backing them up. Well, you do patches for vulnerabilities and things. Microsoft releases a patch for a 0-day vulnerability from a hacker for something. Well, you've now backed up that system and backed up. Well, what happens if you need to go back and restore that machine, but maybe you did a patch in between? Well, you want to make sure you're not reintroducing a vulnerability into your environment and now putting more garbage back into your environment. Right. We actually have a product that builds onto our platform, one of our apps from our marketplace that will scan those VMs for those vulnerabilities before you restore them. So we actually look at the backup data to see that we can scan it. It's things like that. It's ways that we can utilize the backups or even your NAS data to be more advantageous for things like compliance. How do you scan to make sure if I need to find out for someone's PII data and I have a GDPR requirement that I need to pull out everyone's information, How do I consolidate that down? How do I know that I'm looking at it? And by having lots of different sources that can come into the system. So everything from your traditional file backups and your VM backups to database backups to backing up things like M365 with Teams and Exchange and SharePoint, and having those all come back all to one platform allows us to get rid of what we've coined as mass data fragmentation. That idea that your data is so spread out that you can't find anything. Being able to search through that with that Google-like search that we all get used to in our personal lives of, let me find that, I can give it back to you really quickly. Us being able to give you that information back, if it's finding where people's information is, if it's finding a specific file, how do I restore it? How do I get that back quickly? Or how do I manipulate it? Maybe I need to look at the analytics of it. Having all of that in one spot really makes a difference. And we're seeing the trend of how much can I consolidate down to make it easy to manage? How do I continue to add new platforms, new modern workloads? I think that's one of the things we see in the enterprise space often is they're always looking for that next thing. And it may be Kubernetes, and it may be that they're now using Tanzu for that, or maybe they're using OpenShift, or maybe they've decided that they need to change their database and they've gotten rid of Oracle, or they've gotten rid of SQL. Maybe they've gone to SQL in Azure, or they're going with a MongoDB or some other new database side of things. All of those need to be sources that we can pull into the system to keep consolidating that. And what's that's meant as a backup company and as a data management company is we need to stay on top of those and continually add more and more sources. And I think that's where we see a lot of the innovation in the data protection space. Is it's not about spreading things out all the time. It's how do we bring everything back together? Yeah. Now, once we have it together, what do we do with it?
Yeah, you pointed out a number of products. You kind of ran through the Oracle, SQL, NoSQL, Mongo. The beauty of the cloud is that interchangeability, right? That agility that I can say, hey, I don't want this anymore. I want this. And I can pull out that one little microservice or component and slip in something different. And so does it differentiate and see, I got to have a different way to store that Mongo database data as opposed to the SQL data? Or, is that transparent to the users?
Yeah, the great thing is the user doesn't need to know that at all. Whether it's on our on-prem solution or our cloud solutions, or whether you're running a cloud edition out in one of the major cloud providers, whatever it is, or any of our managed service providers that are selling us back out as an offering, it doesn't matter. Once you're in that Helios and you have a source set, you create a policy of what matters about the data. How often does that data need to be backed up? How quickly do I need to restore that data? How long do I need to retain it for? It doesn't matter whether it's a SQL or a MongoDB or Exchange Mailbox or a VM. It's what I set that policy against it. I may say I need to keep this for a week. I need to archive off a month, and I need to make sure that I'm backing this up every 4 hours. Well, that doesn't matter whether it's a SQL database or it's a web server VM that I have out there. I'm still doing the same timing, the same process for them, no matter what I'm doing.
Right. It's kind of more of an agnostic look at its data that you need to preserve with a particular or specified policy.
Exactly. And I think one of the things as enterprises have asked for those type things, the other thing they want is that independence at a lower level. They want the independence on a hardware level. Everybody can talk about cloud all they want. Everybody that says we've got cloud for this, cloud still runs on hardware. Yeah. It is still hardware somewhere. Hardware still matters. Doesn't matter if you're running Dell or Cisco or HPE for your servers. Maybe not. There may be something you need from one or the other. We don't care. For us running as a software company, it allows us to stay with, it doesn't matter which of those we certify on a broad range of different hardware. So the enterprise can now utilize that. I think the other shift outside of just hardware flexibility, and this is something that I think is kind of the transition that cloud has caused, is enterprises want to look at a lot more OpEx than CapEx.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to sell a software offering that is on a subscription model and that you're signing up just like we do for Hulu and Apple TV and Netflix. They were on there for, we do a year subscription for it so that we have it. That's the same thing enterprise want to do. So they know they have, again, that flexibility to be able to change if they want, but also not put out those huge capital expenditures if they're not putting out a data center. Yeah. Why put out the data center if they're looking at just a software model?
Yeah, I'm gonna throw you a curveball here a little bit, maybe, and just take it a slightly different way, because you have the unique perspective of being both in the commercial space as well as in the VAR reseller space as well as in the vendor space, as do I. But I'm just curious. It seems like the uptick and acceptance of a subscription model has really taken off within the consumer side of things, or I should say within the enterprise on the user side. But the challenge has been the vendors, especially hardware vendors. How do I change from this binge every month or quarter to going to this stream of revenue? You know what I'm talking about? It's that has been, I think, a bigger challenge for many of the vendors.
I mean, I will say that for a lot of vendors, it's not a capability thing. It's a business model thing. And business models were built around either selling hardware, which historically has had a very high revenue number. There's a very high margin on selling hardware most of the time, or it was built around large software sales that you have a sales force that realistically is probably transient and may stay with a company. A sales rep may only stay with a company for a couple of years. Well, they want to get as much revenue as they can. They're salespeople. That's what they do. And when they're selling a subscription that instead of getting what would be the amount of a 3-year lump sum, and they're now, because they're only there for 18 months, they're only making half of that, and they're only making a little bit of it a month. They didn't get that big chunk up front. It's a mentality change for the sales teams and for a lot of companies to put their business model in. And some of that is a transition that has been helpful by the market. I believe that it is helping us get there because the market has changed on what they're expecting some companies' quarterly revenues to look like. Before, that quarterly revenue accounted for those whales of deals. So I might have needed to have whatever, I'll say $100 million each quarter. I mean, it's a big number, but maybe $100 million a year or $100 million a quarter, whatever it happens to be for the company. Well, when you switch that to a subscription model, well, that number could be $30 or $40 million a quarter or a year. So the market has to understand that that's still a very successful quarter, because now the next quarter, if they get half the number of new customers, now they're at 40. Now they're at 45 instead of the 30. So it is a better growing model. The challenge there is maintaining customers when they can go off of you so easily. So you do have to have a lot more customer success. You've got to continually innovate, make sure your product's good. It really makes the vendors work harder, I think, when you go to a subscription-based model.
That's an interesting point. It's certainly easier, right? For me, it's no different than I'm tired of Dish, I'm going to Comcast. I'm tired of Comcast, I'm going to flip to somebody else. It's pretty simple, probably why they do institute those 1-year, 2-year programs so that they don't lose you after a month or two. But I think, it's an interesting conundrum that many of the hardware vendors are still seemingly struggling with to make that transition. And certainly SaaS subscription, much more predictable, much easier, much less lumpy, right? In terms of your revenue stream, your forecasting, and just your predictability overall, isn't it?
I think it definitely is. It definitely can be. The predictability is probably, I think, the one that's the best word for it on what people are looking for a solid, valid company nowadays is predictability on it. And if you're selling huge chunk after huge chunk after huge chunk, well, at some point, everyone has a total addressable market that you're going to run out of those big chunks. For a long time, the recurring revenue for those companies was their support and subscription that they would charge on things, or
exactly,
or the renewals. I mean, the cost of renewals. I know when I was with a reseller, it was some of our easiest sales were displacing an existing vendor because we could go in with a new sale that was less than what the renewal cost was going to be for 3 years with their existing vendor, because their existing vendor didn't want to support old hardware, but somebody had to pay for that. So it was cheaper for us to come in, and then we would essentially make the money again on our own renewal cost. Right. I mean, it was such a racket on it. The hardware vendors are still struggling with that, though. I agree with you on that. It's going to take, there's not a great model for that yet, because they still have to pay for it's something physical. Yep. When it's software, it's a whole lot easier.
Yeah, it's definitely a transition. I think that you have to either starve everyone to get to the new model, or overfeed everyone to get to the new model. It's going to become much more consistent, much more predictable. And frankly, as you noted, I think certainly investors, boards, they like that predictability, don't they?
Yeah, in all reality, it's a better model. I mean, it's an easier, there's a lot less risk. If you know that you can do that, you can look at the trends, you can look at, have those numbers been going up? And then over time, the big challenge is it's a big outlay normally for those vendors to get to that. And there's CapEx costs to develop, especially for cloud solutions. I've got the vendor has to put that money out and then have the backing or the confidence to know that they're going to be able to get that revenue back over the time. But there's got to be that initial outlay. Once it's out there, they can see if people start dropping off. And watching how many you get, how many new versus how many drop, I think is a huge number that people watch for.
Yeah, the churn, right? The churn. Yeah. So I'm curious to know, oftentimes I talk with my guests about what I refer to as this perfect storm of technologies, things we've had for years, bandwidth, compute, connectivity. But it seems like the quantity, the amounts of those now are at a point where we are really seeing just amazing things. And so when it comes to backup, connectivity and bandwidth has had a pretty profound impact on people's appetite to moving to backing up into the cloud, as opposed to just having, an array in their data center, right? I mean, have you seen the improvements of bandwidth correspond with the move to cloud backup?
I mean, I think we do start to see more people that are looking to push remote. Part of that is the availability of bandwidth. I mean, as we've been doing this long enough, I remember when if you had a T1, you were going way, it was crazy. Now guys that have 10 and 100 gig links from their office right to a data center on it. Yeah, it's a whole lot easier to back up a lot of data. The challenge there is, as we've had the extra bandwidth, we've also got more data. We're getting more data points. So the capacity that needs to go across that pipe has gone up. It still hasn't, we're not at a point now where the bandwidth has exceeded the data growth to allow us.
The fidelity's higher too, right, Mike?
Yeah, all that space still has to get across the pipe if we're doing something remote. Security is a big reason why people are going, I think, to the cloud on it. And the bandwidth availability is why security is an issue. More people can get to you. So now I need to get it off of my site so that I have multiple locations to protect from security. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. But there are still a lot of scenarios where on-prem is where things have to stay on it. Like if I want to have a backup of a large video repository, if the application wasn't already built in the cloud, that it's already sitting out there, the odds of me being able to have enough bandwidth to do a consistent backup of it is tough. I also do think there is a trend on there, certain things that people are just saying, you know what, that's not data that needs to get backed up. It might need to get archived. I might need it long term, but I don't need to be taking a copy of that every day. Or once I've got one copy in a week, I'm good. I can now just keep a copy for the next month. And it's minimizing that so they can send less across the pipe.
And that goes more into data management and how you're looking at all of the data and the classifying and what's data that you need to preserve versus data, as you put, archive versus constantly be refreshing, right? I mean, it's looking at data a little bit differently, right?
100%. It's that data classification and management of what do I need right now? Where am I putting it? I know we have an example for our NAS solution with Cohesity that we can do, and what we refer to as our external NAS tiering. So I can actually help point at a production NAS and say, you know what, if you've got files out there, you've got a NetApp, you've got an Isilon that's been sitting out there that you're running out of space because it's your tier 0, tier 1, you spent a lot of money on it. Well, probably only 2 or 3% of that data is actually getting hit on a regular basis. So what we'll do is set a policy. Say if this file has not been accessed in the last week, we'll move it off of that and put it on the Cohesity. Now get the advantages of the searchability, get the advantages of the reduced data fragmentation, plus drop your cost. Utilize that very expensive array for what it's made for, and then put the stuff that's not being touched. And when it needs to be accessed, the user doesn't see a difference. We just leave a pointer, they still see it, and we can even, if it starts to get access, move it back over.
And you called that tiering? What was that you mentioned?
We refer to it as our external NAS tiering.
Got it.
Is what we refer to it as. And that, to me, that is something that really can be a differentiator for an enterprise on it. You look at it and say, you know what, I've spent a fortune on this really expensive all-flash NetApp array that's sitting there, but I'm at 80%. And for me to expand that for the way my data rate is growing doesn't make sense.
Right.
But if I can now pull it over and now I can have my area of NAS, or even to just migrate some things off of it, maybe I don't need them. Now I can move them to my Cohesity cluster. And now if they haven't been accessed in 2 months, now archive them out to utilize the archive capability of our cloud archive to archive out to something like a Glacier or a Azure Blob, cheap cloud storage that in all reality, you don't have a high SLA, you don't have a quick return on. But if those files aren't getting access, you just need them there just in case, then why are you putting them on expensive storage?
Got it. Yeah, that's actually, I'm thinking about how the dynamics are changing in terms of where I archive it, what I use to archive it, where I store it, whether I'm occupying it, as you put, in Blob or S3, or if I'm going to, dump it off onto some old device I have locally. I mean, all of those are factors based on my frequency and use of the data, the type of data. I mean, we're looking at, it's not just data versus applications. That data has become much more stratified.
100%. And I've used a line for quite a few years now that you back up your data, but you archive your memories. And when you look at it that way, even look at it from a consumer point of view. On your phone, you've got pictures that are maybe backed up to iCloud. I don't expect that the photo that I took 3 years ago is going to come back as quickly as the one I took 3 seconds ago.
Right.
The same goes for your data in an enterprise. Realistically, that important data that is running your business, that's what you need to back up. That's what you need for disaster recovery purposes. That's what you need for business continuity on it. When you get to your longer term stuff that's been there, that maybe you had think about things like PowerPoint presentations and documents from an AHR document that maybe, it's got to be there once a year. You have to refresh it. You legally have to keep it. Medical records that have to be there, but you're not accessing them. Legal for e-discovery. I need to get to them eventually, but I don't need them right now.
Right.
Those are memories. Those are things I'm probably never going to go back and look at except once in a blue moon.
Right.
So let's archive those off. So back up that data you need, but archive off those memories that I'm not going to look at too often.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Listen, Mike, I know we're up against your next meeting, and I do not want to keep you from continuing on your day. But I have to tell you, man, this has been really interesting, and I really have enjoyed it. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time and telling our audience listeners about Cohesity and just a little bit about backup and what you're up to. I really thought it was interesting. So thanks very much for coming on the program.
Thanks so much for having me, Graham. Really appreciate it. Really had a good time.
Yeah, we'll have you back, okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, terrific. So ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Another one in the books. Thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate it. If you like it, share, tell your friends. Of course, we want to get as many listeners as we possibly can. So with that, thank you again, and we'll look forward to having you back on the next episode of Talking Cloud.
Yeah.